Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Peter Reale, Vice President of Community Member Service, and I have the privilege of leading and supporting our branch network, mobile team, and call center, serving our members across many communities. Welcome to Vancity's 2024 Financial Literacy Month series of webinars. We'd like to begin by acknowledging Vancity operates on the unceded lands of the Coast Salish people, represented today by the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. They have been custodians of this land since time immemorial, and as visitors, we'd like to start this webinar by paying our deepest respects to the elders of the past, the present, and leaders up and coming. Vancity will be hosting a free webinar every Wednesday over the month of November, and we're both excited and proud to be presenting these webinars as it is core to who we are as a financial cooperative and supports one of the principles of cooperatives, and that's providing education, training, and information. The webinar series this year is called Cultivating Wealth, and each webinar in this series will walk you through various life stages from accumulation of wealth to distribution of wealth. Today's webinar is that first step or stage, and that's planting the seed or accumulating wealth. The webinar will be recorded and shared with all registered attendees. It will also be posted on our YouTube channel following the event. If you haven't already, please make sure you follow us on our YouTube, or other various social media platforms to stay connected on and getting access to the great content like this webinar, plus much, much more. The Q&A button allows you to submit a question, and we will certainly be answering questions after this presentation. And lastly, we encourage you to engage with us throughout the webinar and take note on what's most valuable or what might be most helpful to you today as well going forward. With that, I'd like to introduce to you our speakers for this first webinar. Firstly, Cassidy Roeder. Cassidy is an account manager with Vancity and has been with the organization for 8 years. Cassidy holds a Bachelor of Arts degree from Simon Fraser University. She has a passion for helping her members, the community, and the planet, and prides herself in giving trusted advice and solutions, whether it's everyday banking needs, savings and credit solutions, or planning for the future. Our other speaker is Erica Fain-Sonia. Erica is a wealth planner with Vancity Credit Union and Aviso Wealth. With a passion for sustainability, Erica is committed in providing meaningful, tailored advice from a holistic lens to give our members the confidence in better understanding their financial goals and how to get there. Erica holds a Bachelor of Commerce degree from the Sauder School of Business in a concentration in sustainability, as well as a Master of Business Management and Corporate Finance from Luis Guido Carli University in Rome, Italy. And I would also like to introduce Catherine Mandelkorn, Regional Manager with our Sustainable Wealth Management team, who will be here moderating the Q&A as well as providing closing remarks. With that, I'd like to hand it over to Cassidy to get us started. Cassidy, over to you.
Thanks, Peter. Hi, everyone. As Peter mentioned, my name is Cassidy Roeder, and I'm an account manager here at Vancity. There are life stages within our financial journey, and everyone always starts somewhere. And that's what we're here to talk about today, as Peter said. This life stage that we are introducing to you is our accumulating wealth, and it's our starting point. It's also important for me to mention that within these life stages, you may be at a different place than someone else. You may be working towards different goals, you may be juggling different factors, and at Vancity, it's our job to help meet you where you're at and help you along the way. We also want to let you know that it's never too late to start working towards your future. To demonstrate how there are different phases within these life stages, we've come up with a couple different common member scenarios that we do see, and they'll be brought up kind of throughout the presentation as well. And we do hope that they resonate with you in some way. What we hope that it shows is that even when people are in these different places within the phase, ultimately they are still working on how to accumulate and build your wealth. So without further ado, I would like to introduce you to Oliver. He's on the screen there. Oliver is a recent university graduate. He is working full-time, but he's disclosed to me that this is not his forever job. He's currently looking for a job that is more aligned with what he graduated with, his degree, and of course to make more money because That's what everybody wants as well right now. He does currently live with two roommates and pays about $100 in rent for his space. And he graduated school with a student loan of about $10,000 and credit card debt of $5,000. Oliver has also disclosed to me that over the last little month or so, he's been able to allocate around $1,000 to a savings account that he uses for his backup needs. So we'll move on to the next slide, please. So no matter where you are in your phase or the further life stages, there are two basic concepts that we will always start with. And these are your cash flow and your net worth. So you can see on the screen here, we have kind of two different screenshots or snippets of what these look like, and I'll go a little bit more into detail about this. So your cash flow, in essence, is what you earn versus what you spend. So what we look at here is listing off all of your income sources. For a lot of people, and especially in this life stage, it might be things like employment income. As you get a little bit further down the line, we could have employment income or pension or government benefits, maybe rental income if you own a revenue property, and different things like that. But essentially, we want to see your total income in a month. We then list off your monthly payments, your expenses that you have, and usually we start off with your monthly obligations, we call them. So things you have to pay. If you don't pay them, you probably won't have them. So things like a rent, a mortgage, bills, insurance, things that you need to pay. We do also have space for discretionary spending on here as well. So this would be your meals and entertainment, going out, gift giving, other things like that, that kind of give us an essence of what you spend your money on. Generally, at the end of your cash flow statement, we are looking to see if you are in a surplus at the end of the month, so you have more money than you're spending, or if you are in a deficit and you spend too much money. It is a living document, so this is something that will kind of guide our conversation. Are there different places that we can allocate funds? Is there a way we can shift things off to basically, hopefully, get you to a surplus at the end of it or help pay yourself first? And that's generally the method that I like to use when I'm budgeting or looking at a cash flow worksheet, is actually incorporating my savings into this budget so that it's already happening without me knowing it. And that money afterwards is what I have for my discretionary spending. So in Oliver's situation, he's disclosed to me, or we've seen by doing his cash flow worksheet, that he always has enough money typically to cover his rent and his monthly expenses. But he does have some high discretionary spending. So there are some months where he puts a little bit of money aside, hence his $1,000 that he has. But there are some months where he does have to dip into his savings because he's maybe spent a little bit too much. The second concept that we'll talk about is your net worth statement. And this is what you own. I'm going to emphasize the N there, own versus what you owe. So this is what essentially we list off everything that you own and your assets. So this could be checking accounts, savings accounts, investments like RRSPs, TFSAs, cars, maybe real estate, and things that hold value, monetary value, and we compare them to your current debts. These debts will be things that are like credit cards, lines of credits, maybe car loans that are tied to an asset or a mortgage tied to a property. But what we look for here is if you are in a positive net worth situation or a negative net worth situation. If you're in a positive net worth, you own more than what you owe. So, in essence, if something were to happen or you needed to pay your debts, you could liquidate some of your assets and it would actually pay off your debt. That's a great scenario to be in. And ideal if you're in a positive scenario, you don't have to liquidate everything. You should still have some money at the end of the day as well. Provides you security when you have debts. If you're in a negative net worth situation, this is not the case. So you currently owe more than you own. Your assets would not be able to pay everything off. And this is really a scenario where we would want to look at your cash flow and other methods to see how we can start improving your net worth, which at the day is helping to accumulate and build your wealth. In Oliver's situation, based off what I shared with you before, he is currently in a negative net worth situation because his savings only is about $1,000. His checking account kind of fluctuates here or there, but he has a $10,000 student loan and a $5,000 credit card debt. So in my advice here, we would look at his cash flow and see, is there a way that we can start paying down these debts, or how can we start paying these down? So we'll move to the next slide, please. So one of the key aspects of the accumulating wealth stage is also learning how to manage your debt and credit. And this may seem like it's not a true accumulation of wealth because I'm not able to save my money necessarily, but it's a way to help us get there. We are wanting to make sure when you come and talk to us that ultimately we are putting you in a better financial position, and hopefully through this being able to allocate more of your money to savings or to reach your goals. So in this debt and credit management stage, the first thing that we'll do is review your liabilities. We will either look at what you've provided on your net worth statement, so just basically what you've told us, or we can pull a credit bureau. This will be your most accurate way of seeing what you have, a complete list, show up-to-date balances and maybe payments that you need to make on these. But we don't always want to pull credit in the event that we're not actually proceeding because it could have an effect on your credit report. So in Oliver's situation, I've just utilized what he's told me. He's told me he has credit card debt, and he told me that he has a student loan. Once we have these lists, we're going to try and differentiate, are they revolving or are they installment? So revolving credit is credit that is extended to you. It's things like a credit card or a line of credit. You don't have to use these, but they're available to you and are continuously available to you. So when you have revolving credit, typically if you're using it, you're only required to make like a minimum monthly payment. And most times that minimum payment actually just goes to the interest cost of it. So there's always a cost to borrowing, unfortunately. Well, we'll go a little bit deeper into that later. But on revolving credit, your only requirement is essentially to pay back that minimum amount and interest. So sometimes you're not necessarily paying it down. With an installment loan, you're given generally a lump sum of money to be used to purchase something like a car, pay something off, and as soon as that money is given to you, you are required to make payments on it. These can either be monthly, biweekly, but they're fixed payments that are blended principal and interest portions. And so when you make these payments, your debt is actually actively being paid down. So the payments are set for a certain repayment term, we call it. By the end of that term, you will no longer owe that money. So once we've established, is it revolving? So in Oliver's case, his credit card debt, or is it installment, which is his student loan? We will look at things like interest rates. Interest rates will help us determine what should be our priority area for potentially paying it down. As I mentioned, there is usually a cost to borrowing money. And on revolving and specifically credit cards, typically they have a higher interest rate. Most credit cards are usually around 20%. So when you're making those minimum payments, most of that is just going towards interest. If it's low interest, so in Oliver's case, a student loan, and student loans are a very particular situation because here in Canada, most of them, I believe, are 0% interest. So when he is starting to have to make payments on this, all of his payment is actually going to decrease that $10,000 that he owes. So here we would look at most likely paying off his credit card debt prior to even looking at his student loan. One, he's still in this period after graduation where he hasn't actually had to start repaying it yet, but when he does, it's going to start decreasing, which will already improve his net worth situation. So Once we've established which debt we may want to look at managing more, we have a couple different methods for this. And this is where we move into a budget or a payment plan. And we see, is there room within your cash flow statement to potentially allocate more money towards this debt specifically? If there's not, we can look at other methods. And one of those methods is a debt consolidation. And what we do is we actually would take this, in this scenario, a high interest debt, and it's revolving, and actually move it into an installment loan. And so usually the interest rate will be lower, so you're paying it off, and or you're paying less interest on it. And because you're in those fixed monthly payments, you're actually going to be paying it off. Once we've kind of established that within either your budget or your payment plan or debt consolidation, we want to amend your cash flow and your budget based off of our new scenario to see, is there a way that we can allocate more money to an emergency fund or savings of some kind. So I want to bring us back to Oliver, as I always do. So in Oliver's scenario, we have decided to actually consolidate his credit card into a loan. We determined this because he doesn't have much of a surplus. Some months he does, some months he doesn't, but we want to consolidate it to get him into a comfortable payment that fits within his budget. And then what we've done is then allocate the remainder of that into a savings plan. So typically, let's say he paid $200 towards his credit card a month. In this installment loan, we have arranged it so that his monthly payment is going to be around $150. And that extra $50 that he usually would put towards the credit card, because it's already being paid down through his monthly payment, is now actually going to be allocated to what we call an emergency fund. So we'll move on to the next slide, please. Emergency funds. So I just briefly mentioned it on that previous slide, but emergency funds are essentially liquid and accessible cash that is available to you if something happens, your income were to stop, or an emergency expense were to come up. So, your car breaks down, you got to buy a new car battery, and I recently went through this. So I know car batteries are actually not cheap. It's not like going to the store and buying a couple double A's, which also aren't cheap, but it's these extra expenses that you don't actually expect to come up. So having these emergency funds allows you to kind of breathe a little bit. It's a security net that when something like this happens, you may not necessarily have to take out a loan or have to reallocate your whole life or your whole budget to try and fit these in here because you have this backup. Our typical recommendation for an emergency fund is holding about a minimum of 3 months income within some sort of vehicle that you can easily access. So it's important that it can be easily accessed because you could need this money in an instant and you don't want it to be tied up in any way. So some of the options that we recommend for emergency funds would be things like variable savings accounts. Our Jumpstart high interest account that we have here at Van City is a great option. We can also look at tiering it with time. So that's typically what we would recommend for funds that you might need in 7 days or tomorrow or something like that, readily liquid and accessible. Then we have things like cashable term deposits and GICs, where the money may be locked in for a little bit of period. At Van City, we have 30 or 90 days, still accessible to you, but maybe earning a little bit more to also help your money grow and help you accumulate your wealth. We also can look at things like tax-free savings accounts. So if you are having a little bit of a longer time horizon and letting your money grow, this is a tax efficient way of doing it. It's important that we differentiate between a tax-free savings account and an RRSP because when you withdraw from a tax-free, there's no tax implications on that one. Whereas if you have an RRSP, a retirement savings plan, there are implications when you withdraw from there. And lastly, you could also utilize a line of credit. Now, I know that this may seem a little ironic because I just spent the previous slide talking about paying down your debt, but Erica will actually go into it a little bit more in the next slide about how, in general, carrying debt is not a bad thing, but we want to make sure that you know how to manage it so that while managing your debt, you're also being able to progress and accumulate your wealth.
Awesome. Thanks, Cassidy. My name is Erica. I'm one of the wealth planners here at Van City. And as Cassidy pointed out, it probably sounds pretty contradictory, suggesting to use a line of credit as emergency funds, especially since we often find people have this perception that credit or debt is bad. And it absolutely can be. So, for example, if you are running a deficit in your cash flow or you're living beyond your means and utilizing credit to support your lifestyle, this could lead you down a dark path. But credit can actually be quite helpful in some situations, especially as emergency funds for a few reasons. But I'll highlight the two that I feel are strongest with the force. And all I hear on this end are crickets, so I sincerely hope some of you are chuckling back there. But actually, keep to the first slide there. Number one is comparing what we call your cost of lending to your investment return. So if your cost of lending, the interest you'll pay to use your borrowed funds, is cheaper than what you're receiving as your investment return, it may be more valuable for you to utilize credit rather than withdrawing from your investment, since you're growing your money at a greater rate than what you're paying to borrow. Okay. Now, two, does anyone know when an emergency will arise in their lives? Because if you do, it's probably not an emergency and something that you can plan for. So if you don't know when an emergency is going to happen, what if you don't encounter a financial emergency for quite some time? A year, 2 years, 5 years? So rather than having your own money wrapped up and sitting there waiting for one of these what if situations to happen, you could instead have a line of credit that's liquid and available to you to draw from, allowing you to allocate your own money and savings to your future goals. So now, next slide. Some of you might be wondering, how does this work in practice? So Cassidy has introduced us to Oliver already, so I would like you to meet member number 2, Emily. Emily has been working her first career job since graduating post-secondary, making around $3,000 a month, living at home with her family, and has a goal to save towards her first property purchase in about 8 years. Emily so far has saved $10,000 in her savings account. So as Cassie mentioned, if we're suggesting a minimum of 3 months of income, we're looking at around $9,000 that we want to earmark as Emily's emergency funds. Now, in Emily's position, she could absolutely put $9,000 aside in a flexible GIC as her emergency funds, but then that only leaves her to invest $1,000 towards her future property purchase. So what if she would rather allocate a bigger portion of her hard-earned savings towards that goal? For someone like Emily, perhaps it would work best instead to take out a $9,000 line of credit, allowing her to allocate her full $10,000 savings that she's built towards her future down payment. Now, the same option would likely not work best for Oliver, however, because he is actively working on paying down his debt. So we wouldn't necessarily want to add more debt to his plate. Instead, perhaps it's better to work with Oliver, as Cassidy mentioned, in building some saving strategies during that budgeting and cash flow conversation to develop his emergency funds with his own savings. Now, there's a little overlap there. So a third option exists where perhaps the best approach, even maybe for both Emily and Oliver, is to have a combination of their own savings and a line of credit. So depending on their circumstances and of course a conversation with their advisor, Emily and Oliver may prefer to have what I like to refer to as a first line of defense in their own savings before needing to resort to their second line of defense, or AKA their line of credit. With kind of all of this said, ultimately, we will work with you to find the most suitable strategy. Next slide. So now that we've kind of ironed out Emily's emergency funds, she still has all of her savings, plus she has some surplus from her paychecks. So the question now kind of becomes, well, what should Emily do with all this money? So let's get into some basics. Next slide. Before we start any conversation about investing, we must consider the word inflation. Now, this word has been thrown around a lot, maybe too much for some of you, but in the last few years, it's for good reason. It's a very important consideration. So in a nutshell, inflation is the increase in price of the goods and services we rely on over a given period of time, right? We want our money to grow at, on average, at least the rate of inflation. Otherwise, we could lose our ability to buy those goods and services tomorrow with the same dollar today. We call that your purchasing power. So the bottom line is if you aren't keeping up with average inflation, you're losing your purchasing power. Now, with all that said, if you're going to use your money in a very short period of time, inflation isn't going to put as much pressure on your savings since you're going to be spending that money relatively soon. So savings accounts or flexible GICs in the short term, probably going to be your best option. Now, alternatively, if you're looking to save your money for the long term, like Emily is for her property purchase in about 8 years, inflation has a much more significant impact, right? So just even think back to your grocery bill in 2016 if you can versus today. Or you know what, actually maybe don't because that's not pretty. But for a longer investment horizon, like Emily's goal, market-based investments are likely going to be the best option for her because of their potential to meet or beat average inflation rates in the long run. Okay. Now, since Emily has also some surplus left over from her paychecks, she can afford some additional monthly savings to grow her future down payment. So she could, of course, keep her monthly savings in a savings account, or again, you know, given her long time horizon, she could make use of something else called dollar cost averaging in her market-based investment. Now, if you haven't heard of dollar cost averaging, it's a type of investment method that takes advantage of market volatility to reduce your cost per investment unit that you purchase over time. What do I mean by that? So let's say that Emily wants to save $100 a month. If you kind of imagine the market up and down like this, right? Emily saves, let's say, $100 a month when the market is high. Okay? So that $100 will purchase some number of units of her investment. But if in month 2 the market is now down, Emily's same monthly $100, because that doesn't change, can now just purchase more units of that investment because the cost of buying that investment is lower in a down market. So the idea is that over time, as Emily consistently purchases $100 worth of investment units each month over the next 8 years, her average cost to purchase these additional units is more likely to be less than if Emily parked her $100 in a savings account each month and made a lump sum purchase into the market at some point in future. Okay. Now, just as a really quick note, in discussing these different investment options and time horizons, it's really important to us that you actually connect with your advisor to ensure a suitable investment strategy and to make sure that market-based investment options are right for you. Now, lastly, when discussing returns, it's important to understand 2 types and how they can impact the growth of your savings over time. Next slide. Perfect. Awesome. So perhaps you've heard about the term the time value of money, or maybe you haven't. The time value of money is the idea that a dollar today is worth more than a dollar at some future date. So basically what we're saying is that your dollar today has earning potential. But depending on how you invest today's dollar will determine how much earning potential that dollar really has. Enter simple versus compound interest. Okay, so simple interest is classified as earning interest purely on the principal that you invest. So if you invested $1,000 today, which is what we call your principal, at 3% for 1 year, you will end up with $30 of interest at the end of that year. Now, if you withdraw that interest and reinvest only your principal, so only that $1,000 for a second year, you'll make the same amount of interest in year 2, $30, for a total of $60 of interest over the 2 years. Compound interest, on the other hand, allows you to make interest on the interest you've earned. So in our example, you'll make the same amount of interest in year 1, $30, but In year 2, you'll have now reinvested both the principal and the interest, making now a total of $60.90 in interest over 2 years. So, I mean, of course, over the 2 years, the gap between simple and compound interest is not so big. It's only 90 cents. However, the longer your investment horizon, the more exponential your compound interest grows. And so the gap becomes wider and wider over time between simple and compound interest. So I popped in an extra little illustration in here of what our example might look like in 30 years. And as we can see, the difference between your compound interest versus your simple interest is now, after 30 years, over $500. So that's the power of compounding. Awesome. Next slide. So I know Cassie and I have probably provided you with quite a bit of information today. And if you still have questions, or you're feeling a little overwhelmed, or you're still not even sure where to start, we just want you to know that those feelings are completely normal. And our goal is to simply meet you where you're at. You don't have to have it all figured out, just like you also don't need to be completely new to all of this in order to meet with us. So one of the new and exciting things that Vancity has done earlier this year was launch our advice plans to help support our members at any point along your financial journey. So if you're simply trying to figure out what goal to prioritize, we can help. If you want to know how close you are to a goal you're already working towards, we can help. These advice plans are created in collaboration with you and our advisors to find some of the best strategies that will work for you in your lifestyle, while simultaneously making those next steps just that much easier to take. So feel free to check out our website. And of course, if you have any other questions, you can feel free to reach out to one of your Vancity either representatives or tellers or our member service center. But just as a gentle reminder, we have provided general information in our presentation today. So please meet with an advisor to discover what works best for your personal situation. And that's all we have for you today. Thank you so much for your time and attention. Cassie and I are really looking forward to your questions. And I'll pass it off to Catherine now to facilitate our Q&A session. Perfect.
Thank you, Erica. So just a reminder, I'm Catherine Mandelkorn. I'm one of the regional managers with Wealth Solutions at Vancity. Erica and Cassidy, you did a great job in articulating really clearly those what some could experience through that accumulation phase of life. I like the examples a lot too. So hopefully all our viewers may have found some tidbits there for their own circumstances. Cassidy, yeah. Cassidy, you introduced us to cash flow at the beginning. I love this term. I know the word budget can stir some reactions, often because budgets can equate to scarcity, usually meaning cutting down spending in order to save more, which is a fine idea, but it's often not sustainable, because when people cut, they're usually cutting out all the good stuff, like the things that they really enjoy. It's usually those extra things that we put money towards. And those ideas on paper, a spreadsheet, or an app can look great and sound great when we're planning them out, but then it becomes really hard to implement and stick to if you don't have a powerful reason why you're spending less or why you're creating a budget. So
this leads bad diets.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So leads to our first question, is how do I stick to a budget?
That is a great question. Like you just kind of elaborated on, budget can have a connotation to it. And it's exactly that. Like, I need to know how much I'm making at this part and allocate every little last penny to and know where every last penny is going. Now, that is not how I look at a budget. And kind of what you said and how I said in the presentation is I look at it more as that cash flow, and how can we look at your situation of what you make, what you spend, and that includes discretionary spending. I like to go out. I love to eat out at restaurants. I don't like cooking. So like that for me might be actually mandatory in my budget. I don't consider that discretionary spending. That is for me. So it's something about, like I said, allocating savings into your budget. A lot of people do the vice versa, where they budget first, they kind of put everything in there, and then if I have anything left over, I'm going to put that to savings. If you do the reverse and put savings into your budget, even if it's $50 or $25 or whatever that means for you, and that's where we work with you to see what that actually looks like, at the end of the day, that leftover money is for you to use for your discretionary spending. And it could mean that you spend it all, or it could mean that you are, using it on what you want to do, and you might still end up with some at the end of the month, and maybe you put more of that to spending. I think for me too, a budget or a cash flow, like I said, it's a living document. It's constantly going to change. And I don't think it's about nickel and diming every last dollar, but I think similar to managing your debt, I think it's understanding where your money is going and how to prioritize certain things within your budget first, if that makes sense. I don't know if that answered the question, but
Yeah, I think it does. I haven't heard any additional comments. But I think you made such an important point too about discretionary spending, right? We've heard definitions of what that is in articles, books, that sort of thing. But ultimately, how we allocate money comes down to what our values are and what we deem important. So I appreciate that you mentioned that, because that is important. I like the saying here that I've got, but you're putting your money where your values are and spending in alignment with your values. And that seems like it'll be even more powerful to create a budget from that perspective, rather than how do I cut everything out in order to save as much as possible. It's
exactly,
not super
exactly.
inspiring.
Yeah, no, exactly.
It might be in the initial creation, but then the sustainability of it.
Yeah,
Sorry.
exactly. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, we're getting more questions here. So this you also spoke about credit card debt, Cassidy. How does one go about converting credit card debt into low interest debt?
So that is very similar to what I was talking about in terms of a consolidation loan. There are ways you can do it within keeping it as a credit card by like balance transferring to a lower interest card. I still don't typically recommend that just because of the manner in which you're paying it down. Like if your goal is to ultimately decrease your debt, the best way is going to be through a consolidation. And at Vanity, all it takes, well, not all it takes, you do have to qualify, unfortunately, but is booking an appointment with one of our advisors. And we can do one credit card, we can do 3 credit cards, we can even include other loans within that. But essentially, what it does is like at Vanity, for example, a regular Enviro Visa here is at an interest rate of 19.5%. Our personal loans right now are, I think, around 10.15, around there. So that in itself is already a dramatic difference. And then when you consider that the payment type is different, like we said, revolving versus installment, is that you are actually paying that down. So there is a qualification process within that. We do look and need income documents. And what we essentially are doing is just making sure that that new payment that we're putting you in does fit into your cash flow and your budget. But it's simply a conversation to have with one of our advisors here. I recommend booking an appointment with any of our great account managers. We would be more than happy to look through some of those options for you and what fits best within to your budget and your cash flow as well.
That sounds great. So just to summarize for this viewer's question, so coming in, making an appointment with an account manager, bringing in all credit card statements, is that helpful in the first meeting?
Yeah, definitely.
And then you can assess on the qualification of a consolidation loan? Okay.
Definitely. You do need to have some income, but yeah, pay stubs, credit card statements, then we can definitely have that conversation about what that will look like, what those payments will look like, and if it fits your needs for sure. Yeah.
That's helpful. I know it can be really hard when one carries debt. It feels like a weight on the shoulders, and it can be even hard to look at, right? And not really want to face it. But I would encourage anybody watching, if you've got debt that you're not sure what to do with, make an appointment with an account manager. They will meet you without judgment, and they will find a solution for you. Sure. Okay, thank you. Here's one for you, Erica. Erica, you spoke about compound interest. This is such an important concept at every stage of life, but I think most especially for that accumulation stage, because you've got that time value of money and growth on your side the earlier you start in life. But you can start at any point, really. Compounding growth can work in your favor. I like how you illustrated it. But this question here is there a minimum amount that I should be saving? For example, if I only have $10 a month to put aside, is it worth it to start saving or investing?
So the short answer is, of course, any type of savings is going to be worth it. The long answer is more maybe about looking at, again, it comes down for cash flow for us as kind of investment advisors as well, right? Of what makes sense. So if you, let's say, have a lot of commitments that you have to pay for kind of in a month, and you're only able to set aside that $10, what does the rest of your picture look like? Right? Do you have enough to kind of support you if things go sideways? Do you have a support system in place, right? Like, are you able to rely on friends, family, right? Things like that. If that $10 can truly go kind of towards those future goals that you're not going to need to touch for quite some time, absolutely that compound interest is going to be so powerful even on something like $10 a month, as you continue to kind of grow that. And as we've kind of seen, especially in that slide, the longer that you invest, the more powerful that compounding and that time value of money becomes. So I would say absolutely. But of course, if there's other concerns of, maybe things that are coming up in your life, or that you maybe don't have an emergency fund set up, I would say that's probably something that we usually want to start with to make sure that you have a bit of a lifeline.
Great. So is that something then with our viewers, our members, that they could come in to meet with the wealth planner to go over in terms of,
Sure.
I've got this much I think that I have available. Where's the best place for me to put this? And I'm not talking about, this isn't the question, this is for me personally, like not the specific investment,
Yeah.
but where should I be allocating that in my life according to the goals that I have and the things that I want to do? Is
Yeah.
that something that they could expect in coming to book an
Absolutely.
appointment?
Yeah, of course. So, as we kind of touched on a little bit at the end of the presentation, we offer these advice plans that can really provide even like some perspective or some awareness on maybe where the best place for that kind of monthly, savings might go towards. And if you have multiple goals, what's the priority, and where should we maybe start to put that first before we consider some of these other goals? So things like that will, of course, have the conversation. As Cassie mentioned, we have such a great team here at Van City of specialists and other professionals. So you can book an appointment and know that you're going to be in really good hands, and you're going to have those really advice-driven conversations, and ask about the advice plans too, because that's something that will always help at any stage and wherever you are.
I think sorry, I'm going to butt in here too. I think
Yeah.
it's also important within this too that like within our teams, like I'm an account manager and Erica is a wealth planner, but and at every branch, basically, we work not interchangeably. I can't do Erica's job, but that's another
I can't do yours.
legality issue. But like we work closely together. So if you initiate a conversation with me, an account manager, and I think, there's value for you to see Erica and have this conversation, we'll have that. We can even do a group called, me and Erica have done that before, or vice versa. If Erica has a member and sees value in maybe having that debt conversation backwards, but still allocating savings up here in a different capacity, we work very well not just me and Erica, but at every branch you have that capacity and that relationship with the advisors there to get that holistic service that you need to find out what's going to fit you best within that. Yeah,
Thank
that's
you
my
for
that's my
adding
2 cents.
No, I appreciate. Yeah, sorry, Erica, go ahead.
Oh, I literally just said that's a great
Okay.
point. And I think like that's kind of the thing, because I think going into a bank or going into a credit union can be a little bit intimidating, especially if it's like your first experience or you've had bad experiences in the past. And something that I've loved about working here at Van City is that it is a very team generated environment. So you don't have to be scared to, once you go to one person, that's it. And if, they've moved to a different branch or whatever, like, you can't see that person anymore. You can't see anybody anymore. That's not the case. There's always going to be help here for our membership. And yeah, that team environment is lovely. So
yeah, I appreciate you both articulating that. I've noticed since joining Vancity this year, it's not just a way of speak. It's not just lip service. I've really seen that in action and how our staff work together to really serve the member and where they are at and what they need. So kudos to all of you. Okay, we have a couple of more questions. We got some time for more questions. I might jump around here, but I've got one. Well, this could be for either of you, but maybe more for you, Cassidy. If I've got a line of credit, but don't use it, will this impact my credit score or will it hurt it?
I see. This is kind of, I guess, what we're explaining versus like using it for emergency funds. In short answer, I'm going to say no. But it really depends on every individual. When we look at a credit report, or more specifically, your credit score, there are certain things that impact that. One of those things is credit utilization and available credit. So if you have a line of credit that you don't use, that is available credit to you. That, in essence, will not have a negative impact on your credit score. If you have, 3 lines of credits, let's say you have one at Vancity or 2 at Vancity, and then you have one elsewhere, and on 2 of them, you're using like 100% of them and are maxed out, that is where having this one available, this won't particularly affect it, but having these 2 maxed out and having a high utilization will. So if you have, let's say, a relatively, I'm going to say clean, that means different things for different people, credit report, and we are just looking at adding on a line of credit for these emergency purposes, no, it won't have a negative impact on your score.
Great. Thank you, Cassidy. Okay, the questions are really coming in now. So I'm gonna sift through there. So I think this one is let me just see, because it was in relation to something you were discussing earlier. What is the first, so it's in terms of loans here, I'll come to that one. So what percentage of my income should I be saving? And how much percentage should my rent be within? Do either of you have some rules of thumb, or do you not like to go by rules of thumb?
Erica, you can take that.
I was just gonna say, I think it's really hard to go by kind of the hard and fast rules, because I think there's different versions of it, right? Like you want to, like, 60-40, or there's like the 80-10 and 10 or whatever. Like there's a bunch of different kind of methods out there of how to kind of divvy up your income. In BC, I think most people's rents take up quite a significant portion of their monthly income. And so I think the best way that I've found, at least that works really well for a lot of the members that I work with, is again kind of going back to the priorities, right? What is going to make sense for your lifestyle, and what is something that you can stick with and not have to change it all the time, if different things come up, or if you all of a sudden find yourself, not employed, and now what? Like, there's so many things that happen in life, and so I don't necessarily like to play by all the rules. So I prefer to go with what works for the member, and really just starting with where they're at. If it so happens that rent is taking up a significant amount of their income, that's okay. We can try and figure out a way to make other things work for them. If rent is not amazing, then we can look at other ways to supplement or increase savings to those long-term goals. So yeah, I think it's really, at least for me, important to just work with the member where they're at, and I think that's kind of the sentiment that a lot of my colleagues have too, right?
Yeah, great. Thank you, Erica.
Yeah.
we've got another one around student loans. So we were talking about credit, debt, but what is the first step towards getting a student loan? And can I get support from Van City with applying for student loans?
So most student loans, and where it's going to be most beneficial from my perspective and what I understand, is going through the government offered student loans. And that's because they are the ones that offer this 0% or low interest student loan offering with then like deferred payments up until 6 months after you graduate. My recommendation is trying to go through there first. I know they have their own qualifications. Van City, unfortunately, does not really have anything to do with that. We do have products at Van City that are available to students, like student line of credits, different kind of things. We can look at just qualifying you for a personal loan, but they're not necessarily going to have that same advantage as the government ones do. So if you are truly looking for a student loan for going to school, for housing while you're in school, things like that, textbooks, I would recommend going through the government programs first before you're coming to us here to inquire about some extra lending, just because of even that interest benefit of doing the government ones as well. Yeah.
And if they weren't sure where to start, is coming in and booking an appointment with an account manager an appropriate first step, or would you recommend a different first step in assessing if they're not sure where to go even for the, I know you probably can't give advice on the government loans.
Yeah. Because we don't have, I mean, we are more than happy to kind of like same thing, like sift through like a budget for you. Okay, how much does your school cost? What does that look like? How much should you maybe be looking at supplementing? We would just then point you, I'm assuming, I haven't done it personally, so I'm not sure, like to the government website for the application process. Yeah. We can't really help you. Yeah, we can't really help you actually with the application, but we can help you with the planning of it and seeing, and determining what does that amount look like, or that budgeting side of it for your life while you're in school, for sure.
Great, yeah. Thank you, Cassidy. This next question, we've got a few more minutes, so I want to make sure we address as many as we can. This one we spoke, Cassidy, I think you spoke to this a bit earlier with, there's two parts though to this question, is what's the typical interest rate I could expect from a consolidation loan, which you mentioned, and based on current interest rates. But what will determine this interest rate is the second part of that question.
It is a good question. So at Van City, on our loans currently, we have a couple of different options. We have a fixed rate option and we have a variable rate option. Our fixed rate, what that essentially means is that for that repayment term that you have, we can go up to 7 years. Usually we keep it around 3 to 5 if we can. But for that repayment term, your interest rate will not change. Your payment won't change. So at the end of it, it will go down, or you'll pay down off your loan. We have then, so there's no changes, there's no discretion that we have on that. I believe that one is at the 10.5%. I would have to double check that. Then on the variable rate option, and that's based off of our prime lending rate, which as of right now is 5.95. Right, Erica? Do you know? Yeah, 5.95, sorry. 5.95, and it's plus an increment, and we vary on that, and that's where there can be a little bit of discretion. It can depend on your relationship you have with Van City. Are we looking at consolidating debt that's not necessarily ours? So if you're bringing us debt from like I'm just going to Scotiabank credit card, a car loan that's not held here, a bunch of other things. There's a whole bunch of different things that can go into it. So that one can kind of teeter a little bit. It is a variable rate for the matter that your increment won't change for your repayment term. But if that prime lending rate, which we've seen go up a lot in the last 2 years, and this now starting to comes down further, that's going to benefit your payment and more of your payment in that manner. So your payment doesn't change, but more of it will go to principal, and you'll actually end up paying your loan down faster. So there's kind of two different options in terms of the interest rate in general. The discretion on the variable rate is a little bit more up to your individual situation there. Yeah.
And I'll probably just hop in here too. And one of the slides we talked a little bit about the cost of lending, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so when we kind of talk about these different types of loans and kind of what we have in terms of, you know, our expectations of interest rates, over 2022 and 2023, when we saw those interest rates increasing, your cost of lending became quite expensive, right? But now we're in this decreasing rate environment. So actually having a variable rate on your loan could mean that your cost of lending would decrease over the term of your loan, so that it might actually be more beneficial instead of having something fixed. And I know some people like having fixed loans because they know exactly what their payment's going to be. There's no change, and that's that. But it could be beneficial. Now, the danger with some of these variable rates is that interest rate environments can change very quickly, as we've seen in the last few years. So just understanding that there is a little bit more variability with, you know, the potential for that payment, just understanding that that's a potential risk, right, when we talk about variable rates. But kind of equating it back to that cost of lending conversation, and how that can be helpful and beneficial, especially now when we're looking at a declining environment.
Great. Thank you. Yes, like you said, for the sake of viewers and even the recording of this webinar, interest rates are always changing and prime is changing. So yeah, but yeah, great explanation. There is, I think we've got 4 more minutes. This is a follow-up question to what you were both just speaking about. Is there a cap on how high we could expect the variable rate for the loan to go up during the term of the loan?
No, in essence, I guess, because if it is a variable rate and they want to increase prime, and by they, I mean the Bank of Canada, then no. So as I mentioned, that increment that we add on, that is a Vanity discretion, or the account manager discretion that you would see for this. But because it's variable, it really does depend on prime. So that is where Erica just mentioned there is volatility to it. There is some risk. Do we think if you were to get a loan today, do we think that, you know, it's going to skyrocket? No, but if you asked us that 5 years ago or 2 years ago even, we probably would have said the same thing and we would have been wrong. So that is a risk that does come with variable rates. So there isn't really a cap. It really depends on that interest rate market. If it does get to that point where it is extremely high and you can't afford the payment, or your payment is no longer covering your loan, and you're just, we have options for that. And that's where you come back and you speak to us. And I always say to my members, if there is ever a reason you cannot make your payment, please come and talk to us first. Do not just not make your payment. Do not just let it go. Come and talk to us, and we can provide you other solutions, whether it be what we call refinancing, so kind of readjusting your loan, changing payments, something like that. But we can help you there. So if it does ever get to that point again, my recommendation is coming to talk to us where if it's not manageable anymore.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you both. I think the common theme that I've heard throughout your presentation is these are all there's a lot of things to consider, but ultimately, if you want to get more information or dive deeper into those questions and answers, is book an appointment with one of our account managers, wealth planners, wealth relationship managers, wealth advisors. We have a plethora of professionals at Vanity that will take the time to sit with you, answer your questions, and give you some guidance. So thank you, Erica, and thank you, Cassidy, for sharing your time and knowledge with us today. I want to, before we depart, we've got a series of these webinars over the month of November for Financial Literacy Month. So the next event is next Wednesday from 12 till 1 p.m. It is following the series of our Cultivating Wealth series of learning. So this one is for nurturing and growing in the next phase of life when you're managing your wealth. There is a QR code right there you can scan to register. And we also have the registration link on our website if you're not able to scan the QR code today. So thank you all for your time, and hopefully we'll see you next week.